I'll turn it over to Coach Tomlinson, who's going to introduce our speaker for today.
Thanks, Coach. I almost forgot to unmute myself. Okay. At this time, sorry, I'm going to let a few people into this so you can hear our introduction of our awesome speaker today. So I'm honored to introduce Coach Chung. Coach Chung, his coaching resume includes 24 years as boys volleyball coach and his 18th year as the head volleyball coach. 10 years of girls volleyball coaching experience at Deerfield as well. He has coached at the club level, USAV, for 10 years and has coached dozens of players that would go on to play Division I volleyball. As an athlete, Coach Chung played volleyball at Glenbrook South High School and at University of Illinois. When asked what it means to be a warrior, Coach said, "To do everything to the best of my ability with integrity and respect for others and the game." When asked about his favorite memory at DHS, he said, "Advancing to the 2013 sectional finals by upsetting number 2 Barrington in the third set, trailing 23-24. We went on to state and lost to the eventual state champs, Downers Grove South, in 3 sets and finished with a 34-6 record." Coaching accolades for Coach Chung include over 350 wins at the varsity level, the boys varsity level, 3 regional titles, 1 sectional title, and a state appearance in 2013. He also is a 2-time Coach of the Year. So it is our pleasure to introduce to you all Coach Chung, who will be speaking today on the topic of cultivating leadership. All right, Coach, take it away.
Wow, a lot of people here today. Thank you so much for that introduction. And also just a big thank you to the athletic department for setting up these webinars for us. I've really enjoyed them so far, and it's been great to learn from the wisdom and experiences of my colleagues. I'm grateful to be a part of this and appreciate all of you for being here today with us. So I'm going to speak about cultivating leadership today, and why I chose to speak about leadership is because it's a word tossed around just about by every organization and is necessary for success. And though it might be easy to describe, it can seem pretty difficult to bring out in people. And while this webinar is geared towards athletes specifically, I think it applies to any group of people. In fact, many of the lessons that I've learned early on came from my time as a student council sponsor, and in particular, having the privilege to work alongside with the late John Heerman. He really taught me a lot about how to motivate young people, and I really appreciate him for it. So anyway, some of the questions that might come up or usually come up in discussions about promoting leadership might be, are leaders actually made or are they born instead? And this wouldn't be a very long presentation if I believed in the latter, but I think that the answer is actually both. It's true, some people might be wired or predisposed to having some of the qualities of a leader, but it's like any other skill or craft. Just because someone can cook or ski or sing doesn't mean that they've learned all there is to know about it, and we can certainly improve in those areas. As I look around just the list in the room here, the Zoom room here together, I can see a lot of great leaders are joining us today, both coaches and athletes alike. And some of you might actually be natural born leaders, whereas many others might have had to work pretty hard at developing and growing in their own leadership styles. Another question that might come up actually is, if leaders are made, then can anyone be a leader? And is it possible to actually have too many leaders? I truly believe that everyone has the potential to be a leader if they have the drive and the heart to develop the needed traits to become one. I think there's evidence out there that this is true because there really aren't any perfect leaders. In fact, we all have unhealthy or weaker traits. The better leaders just work harder to improve on the more desirable traits and minimize their weaker ones. As far as the other question goes, I don't think I've ever heard of anyone complaining that they had too many leaders. I don't think a company or a business would say, hey, our first quarter earnings were low because we had too many leaders this quarter. Let's try to get less. Or that was a really rough season. I hope we have less leaders next year. That's absurd. So I don't think there is a cap or a limit to how many leaders you could have. Another reason I wanted to talk about leadership is something happened. I had a situation a number of years ago between two seniors on my team. One was a captain and one was not. And the captain was trying to help the other senior with some technique issues that he was having. And as you might guess, sometimes, some people just aren't going to have that. They didn't want it. They didn't pick him to be his captain, and they just didn't want to listen to him. And so that kind of led to a little verbal altercation and some frustrations. And after talking to them both, I realized we need to have conversations as to what it means to be a captain. Are captains even necessary? I know some coaches who don't go with captains, or the way that they choose their captains is very different from one coach to the next. They might be voted upon, they might be actually selected just by the coach, or it might be rotating. And because maybe there's nothing more for that coach to actually do for that captain to actually do, other than to meet it before any contest, shake hands with the officials, and flip a coin. And is that really being a captain then? And what does it mean to wear the C right across your chest? And so those are some things that I wanted to talk about. And so I would gather, all of my seniors typically before the start of a season. We'd have a meeting, and we'd have some talks about what the off-season training is going to look like, and maybe groups that they might be leading and how to lead those groups. And also, some of this talk is going to come from some of the meetings I had with my own coaches as well, in terms of expectations and things that I'd like to see them use, so that when players come to me, they might be a little bit, already prepped and ready for this, and that we're all on the same page together. So I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen real quick, because I want to jump into a PowerPoint. So I've got a few slides that I wanted to share. And so I talked about this meeting that I would have with my seniors. And one of the first things that I would do with them is I'd just go around the room, ask them, what is leadership? How is it demonstrated? And really, there is no wrong answer here. I wasn't looking for one particular answer. I just wanted to hear what they had to say and what it meant to them. And maybe some people would get ideas from the others. I like these all. These are some of the most common ones that I got, something to do with modeling, or sacrifice, or always doing what's right. Certainly motivating and inspiring are two big parts of leadership, and as well as taking ownership and responsibilities. One common phrase that many of us may have heard is the first one in the gym, last one to leave. And this idea of serving others, I think, becomes a big part of leadership as well. And I agree with all of these. But there is one definition that stuck with me. It really resonated to me with me when I heard this a long time ago. And so it's how I describe leadership. And leadership is getting others to do that which they don't yet realize they want to do. That's kind of a wordy and a mouthful there. So in other words, I think another way of saying this is just getting people to do something because they want to do it. Not out of fear or because they're feeling pressured to do so. Not because they simply want to make a coach or someone else happy, right? They do it because they want to do it. And that's the key. So then I guess that some of you may be wondering, how do we get someone to run through that proverbial brick wall, right? I mean, that certainly doesn't look fun at all. So I actually, as I look at it more and more, it kind of does look somewhat fun in a weird way. But anyway, this is what I want to talk about. So I've got a few points that I'd like to go over with you. And this one's the lengthiest of them all, but I think it's probably one of the most important. And that is that leadership is best served one-on-one. I believe that relationships are at the core of everything we do when it comes to working with other people. I mean, you could be the smartest person in the room and a heart that's full of good intentions. But unless someone knows you and knows that you have their best interest in mind, it probably won't matter very much to them. I love this quote. Perhaps many of you have already heard this or seen this before, but it's something that I believe really rings true. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's something that I try to remind myself of all the time. This next one, anonymity buries leadership potential. I kept playing with that because I didn't know how I wanted to say it. And so I have multiple points underneath that, actually. It's wonderful if you belong to or lead a group that has a ton of members. It means you're probably doing something right because people want to be a part of it. However, be careful because you have to be even more intentional about providing opportunities for them to get involved. It's very easy then for someone, if you belong to a big group, it's very easy for them to assume, hey, there's so many people in this room, someone else will step up. I don't need to do it. And thus one's leadership potential may never be realized. Certainly that's not the case. If you only have like 2 or 3 people in the group and you're like, oh, who wants to do this? Well, it's pretty awkward if you don't volunteer. But when you're in a group of 100 people, no one will notice and no one will care. Something else that I discovered recently, I was at a meeting at Prospect High School where we had a guest speaker. Many of you may know him. His name is Jim Block. And he was an AD at Glenbrook North and at New Trier, and then he became a speaker and for a lot of different groups. In fact, we had him at our school for a while as well. And he invited student athletes and their parents to this leadership, to talk about leadership. And I happened to go with my son. He was a sophomore at that point. And he asked athletes in the room, he excluded the parents, he asked athletes in the room, please finish this sentence if you can. Nothing ventured. And it was just like this for a while. Nobody said anything. It was really, really quiet. Now, of course, you're muted. Maybe you do have something to say, but again, it was like this. It was so eerily awkward. All the parents were like bursting at their seats, like, come on, this is an easy one. In fact, if I were to ask them, I can't see people really on my screen. I can see it. Mr. Coach Beaumont, do you know the answer to this one? We're about the same age.
Nothing gained.
Nothing gained. That's simple, right? If you don't try, how are you going to succeed? Right? That's like a saying that many of us grew up on. I was in shock by the fact that nobody could answer that. And so, at least until one of the parents, filled the blanks in. And so I tried it the next day. I went back to my classes, each of them actually, and I took 2 minutes. I just actually ended up being more than 2 minutes because it led to a long conversation afterwards about just making mistakes and being willing to take risks, but nobody got it. Nobody could get it right. Until actually one young man tried, good for him, and he failed. He said, nothing ventured, nothing lost. And that's when it hit me. Things have changed. I don't know why. Things have changed from the time when I was playing and competing and many of your coaches were competing. It's a different world today. And some may blame social media, right? And say, well, everything we do is out there and it's in the public eye and it's very easy to get shamed and embarrassed. But that message really hit me, that our young athletes today are less willing to take risks for fear of that embarrassment and putting themselves out there and failing. If they never try, no one will ever, make fun of them, or they won't look silly in front of other people. And so that means we need to do more instead of just relying on people just to step up. So how do we get people to do that? And this is that notion of one-on-one. Here's an example of something that I might do, because trust me, I learned this the hard way. I made tons of mistakes and I wasn't getting responses for what I was looking for. So suppose I was preparing for one of our annual middle school clinics. We do clinics every year, Caruso and Shepherd. We used to visit Holy Cross and whoever else wanted to see us. And I needed someone to present a quick 3-minute lesson on blocking. Okay, well, I got a bunch of guys who can do this. I could ask the group of seniors, I usually bring them anyway. And I say, hey, does anyone want to do this? And sure, sometimes year to year, I might get somebody who's kind of a bit of a go-getter and he'll volunteer. But usually I get crickets, nothing. It's quiet. And then now I'm kind of stuck and it's awkward. And then if I approach somebody after that to do it, then like, well, you're only asking me because nobody volunteered. Well, yeah, okay. But actually, think about this. Instead, what if I approached someone and said, hey, I really like your footwork and your ability to read setters. I think you'd be an amazing person to teach our young future warrior volleyball players some of that by leading them next week through a quick lesson. What do you think? If I did that, how much more empowering and excited would that player feel to do something like that? And here's the best part. It's not fake. Right? I'm not trying to manipulate them. I wasn't just kidding when I said that, right? It's truly what I believe. And now we have a win-win situation. So I really believe that one-on-one piece is so critical to developing our leaders. Where are we going? If you're going to lead someone, know where you're going to lead them. That's really important. There are some people who will follow you blindly because of who you are. But I think it's important that we have some final destination. I love this quote by John Wooden, who probably stole that from Benjamin Franklin. But that's everything we use is borrowed anyway, isn't it? And I just think that this is great. Failure to plan is planning to fail. And I think this can apply to just about anything, even as we coaches are preparing our plans for the drills and the practices that we're doing. You don't put a good plan together, you're probably not going to get much out of it. I think it's important to set clear goals and expectations, both at the individual and team levels. And how much better would that be if you could do it together? Sure, I could tell the team, this is our goal this year, this is what we're going to accomplish, and this is what I need you to do, and you to do, and you to do. But if we're allowed to do that together, that obviously then creates more ownership and accountability as well. Athletes, I think it's important that you work with your coaches. If there's a culture already established, know what that culture, the norms are. If you want to lead and lead within that program, I think that's a very important piece. But on the flip side, if you've been doing things as long as some of us have been doing, right, you can be quite antiquated and you can get kind of stuck being old school and doing things that, you know, might have worked a long time ago. But I think it's important that coaches are in touch with their players and with what's going on around them to modify or evolve your said norms to avoid that from happening. This is a big one. It's probably one of the hardest ones for me personally, but I think being humble and unassuming is so key to all of this. Something that I say to myself all the time, and I say to my coaches as we enter a season is, hey, don't take yourself so seriously. You're really not that big of a deal, okay? And I actually say that to myself sometimes as I enter a classroom too, you know, especially if that classroom might be a little bit more boisterous or rowdy. I'm like, hey, don't take yourself so seriously, Mr. Chung. You're not that big of a deal. And I think it's helped me skate by some what would normally be pretty tense moments. And I wanted to share this story. I circled him. I don't know if you can see him, but the guy that I circled there is the late and legendary Carl McGowan. He's one of the most well-known and decorated volleyball coaches of our time. He had been a part of 7 consecutive Olympic Games. Now, remember, that's every 4 years. So it's not 7 years. He's been involved with USA men's volleyball for 30 plus years, which is quite an accomplishment because they tend to rotate a lot of those coaches in and out. So I had the privilege he passed away in 2017, and a couple of years before that, I had the privilege of attending a clinic that he was a keynote speaker to. And he shared a lot of great things, but I wanted to share one story that he shared with us. And it was the way that he was connecting to what some might consider a very difficult player to coach. You know, some coaches will use terms like prima donna or something like that. Of course, we don't have any of those at Deerfield. I'm just saying, you know, he was dealing with that because he coaches the world's best players. And so he had arguably the first or second best libero, which is like a defensive specialist, on his team. And he was watching him go through his workouts and some drills. And he was just off to the side. And something about the way he was doing it, he thought he could help him. And he's Carl McGowan, remember? Well, he waited till he was done working out. And he walked up to him, approached him, put his arm around his shoulder and said, son, can I coach you here a minute just about your technique? He actually asked him for permission. He's Carl McGowan. This libero is great and all, but this guy is so much more accomplished. Of course he can coach him. But just that approach that he took, I think it made all the difference in the world. Now, of course, no player in his right mind in that situation would ever say no. Right? But just getting that invitation in, right? I think that makes all the difference because whatever comes out of his mouth next is going to be even more powerful to that young man. And if Carl McGowan can do it, I think any one of us certainly could. And I think the other piece of this, so if I have some volleyball players that are probably listening to this, and I approach you and I say, hey, can I coach you with something here? I'm not trying to manipulate you or say that you're difficult to coach. I think that's generally the posture that I want to take. Doesn't matter if I'm your head coach, assistant coach, volunteer, teammate. You know, I think it's important for us to remember, you know, not to take ourselves so seriously. We're not that big a deal. Okay. I have one final slide that I wanted to share before I finish up here, and I think I'm doing okay on time. And that is, we need to recognize that leadership comes in so many different forms. Right. And I think anyone who's been a part of team sports for a long time knows you got your real rah vocal leaders out there, the 4 generals, and then you've got leaders that just put their head down and grind, and they just always do things. They're showing up early and things. They don't say a whole lot. Then you got your stat leaders and the people who are your leading scorers or best percentages or whatever, best times, and maybe they don't do any of the other things. And then you have those that are just behind the scenes kind of people, servant leaders. There's so many ways in which people can lead. And I think it's important that we as coaches and players recognize and appreciate all of them. I wanted to leave you with a story that always reminds you of this. It's one of my favorite stories. I have a lot of them actually, but I'm going to share this one. And it's about a young man named Jack who graduated in 2011. I actually reached out to him. I called him and I said, you know, there are parts of the story that may not be the most flattering to you, but the whole of the story is. And I was wondering if you'd be okay if I shared this. I could share you anonymously. And no surprise to me, he was like, by all means, coach, I'm flattered that you even want to share the story. And if you want, he took it one step further, I'll even come in and talk. I'll give this part of the talk. I'll give a testimony on it and all this. I'm like, no, I only got 25 minutes to talk here. And so I'll do that part. But I think he may or may not be here. I know he said, I want to support you and I'm going to be here for you. So, you know, I think he might have even tried to log into Zoom here. But anyway, he graduated, as I mentioned, in 2011. He was one of our best, at least at Deerfield, he was one of our standout basketball players. I think he was like the leading scorer and leading rebounder. I actually called him for some of these facts here because I didn't want to make stuff up. I think he was all conference, all area. And he was just a dynamic player who always found himself on the floor as opposed to being on the bench. And he happened to play volleyball. Freshman and sophomore year he played, and he was part of the team, and they had a great time together. He was friends with a lot of the guys. But junior year, he needed to sacrifice something because he needed to work on his basketball. So he didn't come out junior year, and that put him pretty far behind in regards to where he would be his senior year coming back. Well, he decided to try out again senior year, and the skills just weren't there, at least not at that time. And I had to have the really unenviable and tough decision to cut him. And it was so hard because he was a young man that I really, really liked and I wanted around, but it just wasn't going to work out roster wise, at least the way I had thought it would. And so I had to cut him, and we went into practice the next day and something was missing. I couldn't put my finger on it. We had some talent on the team. Actually, Coach Bolick was part of that team. He was part of the same graduating class, and he was our floor general, if you will, in that group. And he had actually sacrificed his original position as an outside hitter to become a setter because, well, that's what our team needed, and that's what leaders do. And so I talked with the captains a little bit afterwards, and I said, guys, I think I made a mistake. And, you know, that's not athletes. I don't know. Maybe it's easy for you to admit that you made mistakes all the time, but that's not always easy for a coach. And so I acknowledged to the team that I think I made a mistake. And I think we really need someone like Jack. He's not going to play a lot, but man, wouldn't it be nice to have him? And unanimously, everyone with a big resounding, oh, yes. You know, we didn't want to say anything because we didn't want to insult you or anything or your decision. We respected it, but yes, coach, we agree. So now I had to do the next tough thing. I had to call him and I had to admit to him my mistake and kind of grovel for him to come back. And so again, being the amazing, gracious person that Jack was, he was super excited. He said, heck yeah, I will be there. I will be there tomorrow, whatever you want me to do. And if I play, that'd be awesome. But if I don't, you just tell me what you want me to do. And so I'll speed everything along. The season was awesome. Record-wise, it was okay. We were above 500. We made it to the regional finals. You know, we got knocked out in that first round to number 1 Barrington, I think, that year. I'm sure someone can correct me if I was wrong. Fact check me there. But Jack made that season so memorable. He was just remarkable. He took that role, embraced it, and just went to the next level with it. He had a different handshake with every player on the team, including the staff and coach. I was stressed. Jack, I think I still remember it if you're ever going to watch this. I don't remember all of it. I remember we ended with kind of like a side bump thing because I told you to keep it really simple for me. but you had one for everybody. It's the starting lineups. When they announced the lineups, you kind of went out and did all the cheers with them. And then when anyone would sub in or out, you do that with them. You had different cheers on the sideline for when we scored the first point, when we scored the second point. Actually, that was the year that the Chicago Bulls, I think, developed what they called the bench mob with Taj Gibson on the bench. I just remember him being one of the big people on the bench there. And you brought that to Deerfield, so much so that there were times in games where I was subbing somebody out, and instead of them being disappointed to come out, they were like they would run to the bench because they couldn't wait to be part of the bench mob after that. And that was special. No one will remember exactly our record or, who was the leading kill getter or assist leader. Well, assist leader had to be John because he was our setter. But besides that, no one will really remember some of those details. But I think they'll always remember the relationships and the great time that they had. And I think having a leader like Jack, who really didn't play very much that season, was extraordinary. And I just, and I can't say enough about him. So I believe that's about all I have as far as the slides go. And I hope it was, oh, there's Jack. I see you there. Hey, bud. But I just wanted to say thank you again for coming and listening and spending your afternoon with me.
Coach Chung, so well done. Great presentation. Awesome story at the end. Really cool that Jack's on here too. That shows the impact of coaching even years later and people coming back. So that is outstanding stuff. If anybody has any questions, you can throw them in the chat. Otherwise, I will turn it over to Coach Tomlinson, who can give us a preview of what's coming next with the webinars. And then just as a reminder, super exciting time. If you're a winter sport athlete, be on the lookout for something from your coach regarding practice in the upcoming days. For everybody else, contact days are looking to start as soon as next week. So super excited to see some of you back in the building soon.
Thanks, Coach. And Coach Chung, that was awesome. What great messages and such a great ending. That the Jack story was so cool. So thank you. Thanks again for sharing that. Thanks for everyone who jumped on. Just a reminder, hopefully we'll see you same time, about 4 o'clock on Thursday, to hear from our athletic trainers, Bree and Carl. They've got a lot of great information for student athletes and coaches, including just general health and wellness, but also injury prevention. So please, stay tuned for that, or I guess come Thursday to hear another great message. And again, just thank you to Coach Chung for sharing your stories and your awesome quotes and your inspiring messages. We really appreciate it. Warriors, have a good rest of your evening.